I want to talk to you guys today about a specific strategy we're using to get niche, to get really efficient in our marketing, to get the most bang for our buck. Over the last 3 to 4 years, sellers have compiled a mountain of equity in their properties, and it's made it really, really challenging to find distressed properties. What that does is it means we have to spend a lot more money on marketing typically just to get one deal. So 3 or 4 years ago, we may have been spending $2,500 to get a deal, $500 to get a deal in some markets, and now you may be spending $5,000 to $10,000 to get a deal to make $30,000 or $40,000. So today I want to talk about niching down and focus in a niche that I really, really love and people in our community are having a ton of success with. And I want to talk about the foreclosure leads. For those of you, if you're maybe new to this, we pull a list of properties with some criteria on it. And then we have the ability from public record to pull niches like foreclosure or inherited or absentee owner and all these different reasons we think somebody might be interested in selling us a property. Today, we're going to talk about foreclosure. I really, really love this niche. Now, we're not seeing a 2008 like foreclosure boom, but we are seeing steady state foreclosures. There were 39,000 foreclosures in the first quarter, and a number of them completed. They're steady state. So what that means to us as investors is it's a steady stream of real problem in the marketplace where we can solve it. And how do we solve it? Well, if you have a purchase contract and a proof of funds, a lot of times you can stop the foreclosure before it ever goes to auction. So it's a real opportunity to know, even before you get on the phone, exactly what your seller's problem is. All right, foreclosures. So understanding it is important first up front. A foreclosure is when a seller or a homeowner repeatedly does not pay their bills, and then eventually the bank will say, we're going to need to take that property back or somehow get our money back. Typically, they go through a proceeding, a process that they foreclose on the house, they take the house back, and then they do whatever they're going to do with it. It becomes a bank-owned property. Eventually, it usually goes to auction. A couple things to know about this, because every state is one of two things when it comes to foreclosure. They're either a judicial state, meaning that if a property goes into foreclosure, it goes through the court system and through a judge, or they're a non-judicial state. It doesn't have that same lead time. It just goes into foreclosure and then often goes to a set auction date without any of the stuff in between. And what happens for the seller? Well, what happens is after a certain amount of time with that bank, the seller doesn't pay their bills, and the bank will start to send notifications. So I typically see two types of notifications on a foreclosure. One type is called a notice of default, and that is typically when the bank is kind of giving you the warning that they're starting the foreclosure process. And eventually you continue to not pay, and they send a notice of judgment. When the notice of judgment comes, that means they are full steam ahead and it is going to auction. Here's the thing. Every state has a different timeline, slightly different process and nuances to it. But there are states that if you get notified you're in foreclosure, you have 60 days until the auction. So that's like Tennessee, where our headquarters is. And compare that to Florida. Florida, you can be in, there are people that have been in foreclosure for years now. Like the 7-year ghost foreclosure situation is not that common. So we typically see the foreclosure process taking between 12 and 18 months in the state of Florida. So they kind of get notified. They get an opportunity to respond in writing. They get the notice of judgment eventually over time. And it's a process. Here's the massive benefit to the marketplace of investors. When you do get a hold of somebody who's in foreclosure, you know what their pain point is. And you can address that pain point once you build rapport. Now, I wouldn't call somebody out of the gate and say, hey, Adam, your house is in foreclosure and I'd like to buy it to help you out. That's usually not the best strategy. Eventually, you get to that part of the conversation, but really you're just asking those sellers if, hey, I'm looking for properties in this area, and I was wondering if you had a house that you maybe considered selling. And you start the conversation, you start to build rapport, you start to find out maybe some deeper reasoning, financial distress, what problems you can solve, how you can help them. Is there enough equity? Can you get those folks moved into another property? What are they going to do when they get foreclosed on, or you buy their house? So you just start to solve their problems. So foreclosure is really, really, really beneficial to us because it's one of the few lead sources we go in knowing what the pain point is. A couple places that I like personally to get the foreclosure data, like you might be thinking, where do I find all these places that are in foreclosure? Well, some of them you can find through real estate agents. You can even find them on Zillow at no cost. If you have a batch leads account, you can actually put some criterion, locational data where you're looking, what types of houses you're looking for, and then click a button that says foreclosure and it'll give you foreclosure data. You can even skip trace it and call it. We just did this on a 5-week challenge not too long ago where I personally got on the phone and called these people. It was amazing. We got some really good leads out of it, and we even had a seller appointment. So I spent about 45 minutes on the phones on a foreclosure list of 70 properties live in front of all of our friends, and literally set an appointment, had multiple really good conversations about property. So I know for fact that it is a really good niche. Now, what are some of the challenges? Like this is what people don't tell you. You would think that a seller who's going to foreclose on their property would be grateful to put money in their pocket, not get foreclosed on, possibly save their credit from having the foreclosure on their credit report. But frankly, what happens for a lot of people in financial distress is it's a lot of weight to bear. So they oftentimes start to ignore the problem. They quit opening their mail. They just kind of accept it, and they just are living their life like normal, and they're not open to having the conversation. So you will get that. It is our job to help them understand that they do have options. Now, one of those options is to sell you their house for cash. Maybe they put some money in their pocket, and maybe you're even able to stop it from going to auction, which, like I said, you could do with a purchase and sale agreement and a proof of funds. A lot of banks will say, that's fine. We just want our money. They'll stop it on their end, and then you work with your title company to get an affidavit to take to the county, and then the county will stop it from going to auction if it's that close to auction. And now here's the thing. When you're dealing with these foreclosures and these folks on the phone about solving their problems, you just have to be very, very careful about letting them know that they have options. Like, you should be telling them that, but you have to be careful about just attacking it head on, saying like, hey, I know you're in a bunch of financial distress and I'm your only solution. Because the reality is there are multiple solutions for somebody in foreclosure. There's a loan modification. They could potentially list the property with an agent. Sometimes they do want to do that. Sometimes they don't. They can file bankruptcy. They do have multiple options. So what I like to do is be a guide to these folks and let them know what their options are and kind of guide them through those options. Sometimes you may help somebody to start a loan modification, but ultimately the timeline gets crunched, the banks don't come through, and then the cash sale to you does become their best option. And that really, really allows you an opportunity to create a great experience, to be a true problem solver, and to possibly get a house that you can rehab and fix up, or you can wholesale it and make money on it, of course, but you're going to do it in exchange for a really high quality service when it comes to foreclosures. Now, last year, I think we stopped 5 foreclosures. So that process, like I said, is going after the banks with your purchase and sale agreement and going there with your proof of funds, which you can get from like a hard money lender or a private lender if you don't actually have the capital, but you're going to borrow it to be a cash buyer. And banks will oftentimes accept that. When you call the banks, you have to talk to their delinquency departments or their folks who are doing kind of collections, things like that. Because when the bank sends it to foreclosure, it goes to a foreclosure attorney most of the time, depending on the state, but most of the time it goes to a foreclosure attorney and it starts to rack up a bill. So you find the right person inside of the bank. They're usually excited because they know they like the idea of getting their money back. Once they said, yes, we're good to go. We are working. We will work with you. We would love for you to buy the property. You then have to make sure that it doesn't go to auction with the county. Those are two different systems. Like, there's the bank who's filed for the foreclosure. The attorney's typically the intermediary. They're working for the bank. They get it moving in the county. County schedules it for the county auction. and it goes on the auction site. So you have to kind of stop it on two different fronts. You can typically do that through a local foreclosure attorney who can help you with that, or a title company, something like that. Okay, so the big thing with foreclosures are these folks are in financial distress. They're typically ignoring the problem. You need to absolutely be their guide and understand the process inside of your state. How long does it typically take? How are they notified? How many times are they notified? What are the title companies' involvement? Who are the foreclosure attorneys? You can start talking to these people now. So as you start to call this foreclosure list, you are able to then be an expert when you talk to the sellers and help them out in their situation. Okay, the last point here is the difference between foreclosures and many other niches is that they come with urgency oftentimes, because there is a timeline with the foreclosure. It is going to go to auction, and you know what the problem is you're solving most of the time. Now, I'll tell a quick little story about an experience that we had, because it doesn't always work out perfectly. And then I'll tell a story, a quick example of a few that have worked out perfectly. One property, we had a seller. We were going to be able to actually give him $50,000 at closing, and we were ready to stop it. He was 13 days from going to foreclosure. We were ready to go into action, and we've stopped him as short as 30 hours prior to the auction. So it's definitely doable. And the seller said, I want $100,000 in my pocket. And we just couldn't pay 50 grand more. We wouldn't make any money. It just wouldn't make sense. We gave him all the options. And ultimately we said, you can either make 50 grand in this scenario with working with us, or get foreclosed on and make zero. And he chose zero. So that does happen. Now, good on the good news side of it is when you do talk to people who do want the help, it's usually late in the game. The example I gave you earlier, which was 30 hours, they said, hey, it's Monday, halfway through Monday, and on Wednesday, there's an auction for our house. We're going to lose it. They said, we will sell it to you. We just don't want the foreclosure on our record. So that was the problem we were solving for them. They gave us a good price. They got a little money in their pocket. We immediately went to the bank and to the county, got an affidavit, signed it, and stopped the foreclosure. But we had the information. We knew that they were in foreclosure. We knew what they owed on the property. And then one other piece that is so important for anybody who's going after these is to understand that what you see on the remainder of the mortgage balance is typically not what the final judgment is, meaning the amount of money that the seller owes on that property. Because number one, they haven't paid their bills and they racked up a bunch of fees. Number two, it got sent to an attorney who slapped on somewhere between $5,000 and $7,000 worth of attorney fees, I'm sure. And those things stack up. So they might owe, say, $140,000 on their property, but the final judgment is $158,000. So you do have to make sure you find out what the final judgment is. And you can oftentimes, once you get the purchase and sale agreement and you send it over to title can work with the foreclosure attorney, or you can call the foreclosure attorney directly yourself and try to get the final payoff so that you can purchase that property. Okay, bottom line, the riches are in the niches. The market is still transacting, even though there's more inventory, even though it's not as great as it was in 2021, 2022, there's tons of opportunities out there, and foreclosures is just one of them. And it's a way to get really efficient, to spend the least amount of money, go after deals, and get potentially the greatest return on your money and on your time. So definitely go check out foreclosures. And this is stuff we're doing in 7-figure flipping all the time. We have people in here who that's all they do, and they're just absolutely crushing it. So check us out at 7figureflipping.com too, or 7figureflipping.com/runway. And I hope that this helps you in your business. If it does help you, make sure you jump on to one of the social media channels. Let me know, hey, this helped me. I'm going after it. If you have questions, reach out to our team at 7-Figure Flipping. We would seriously, genuinely love to help. Have an amazing day.